Welcome to the Be That Healing Girl podcast. And on this episode today, we're going to talk about why the good times still trigger your freaking anxiety. And let's just say that you had a great weekend. Maybe it was a long weekend and everything was good, right? Maybe it was even more than good. Maybe you felt like you had the most connected time. You felt closer. It was really amazing. And then Monday hits, and now you're scanning every single text. You are looking at that little miscommunication. You're thinking to yourself, like, what did I say? What did he say? Right? Or what didn't they say? Or why didn't they hold my hand as long? Or wait, maybe you're even thinking, why am I just anxious right now? Everything was good, or really that little hiccup was nothing to write home about, but somehow it feels like everything is crashing, even though technically everything during the weekend was pretty good, right? And you ironically wanted this type of weekend, right? You wanted a good weekend. Maybe you had even really planned for this opportunity and it was all kind of working out and you actually got it. You had that time together, and for some reason you're still now more anxious than before. Zero logical sense, no reason for you to doubt it, and yet here you are. Now, I also want to say that this can happen in good situations, and this can definitely be amplified if we did have some kind of disagreement or fight, and when we're anxious, right? So one of the things that I notice is that not being able to enjoy the good without bracing for the bad, right? Without bracing for the impact. And maybe the relationship is going really well, right? It doesn't really matter if you're in the kind of the beginning stages or, you're a year plus in, and it's really exhausting, right? So it's also with your partner, at least this was happening for me. He really couldn't understand why I was spiraling, right? Like we just had a great weekend together, right? Like I just left your house. What are you talking about? Like what is going on here? And it felt really, that was like another added layer of frustration around, okay, why are we fighting? Why am I so triggered around XYZ? So all that to say, if that feels really familiar, then you are in the right space. And if you're new here, my name is Claire. I'm a relationship coach and I love helping high achieving, high performing people who you are really doing well on, definitely in your career, in your resume. The receipts show that you are pretty smart, you work pretty hard. And I will also say that the anxiety is working you pretty good too right now, right? Like it's such a contrast to be doing so well out there in your career, but internally with your romantic relationships feeling absolutely just horrible, right? You're overthinking, you're second guessing, and really there's not a lot of evidence to support that that's actually something to worry about. So if that is you, you are in the right spot. And thank you ahead of time for hitting the 5 stars. It means so, so much to keep this podcast going. I'll be honest that it really does feel like a little high five. So thanks for doing that ahead of time. And I definitely want to spend some time today talking about, why does I call this safety system. I know that nervous system is really popular these days, and it's true, but really this is like an all hands on deck, mind, body, spirit safety system that can get activated even when nothing is technically wrong, right? And I want to break it down, and I'll tell you something about in the morning that happened for Craig and I after we had one of the best weekends together, and I still ended up in my head. And quite honestly, it wasn't just over long weekends. This was pretty much every weekend that this would happen when we were long distance ish. He was definitely more avoidant, and I was more anxious, and now we're secure. So, and before we dive into the meat of today, I definitely want to give a client shout out to one of my one-on-one clients. We'll call her Char. She really had some big anxiety, and her partner has a hobby that he's really, really into, travels for it, spends a lot of time doing it. And not only that, but he was going out of town. And when she first came to me, she was so in her overthinking space and her anxious space in her mind because she would be so worried about him going out of town. Literally, the most, I think this hobby is pretty boring, but would feel all kinds of feels and feel really alone. And one thing that really broke through literally this week for her was she had spent a lot of time worried, and we worked through a lot of strategies around her fear around being alone. And I checked in with her this week, and she was literally just so glowing. She was glowing. She was delightful, and all of her worry about spending the weekend alone and like a couple days alone, she said she felt so calm and she had the best time. She's like, "Yeah, I went to dinner with a girlfriend and came home and watched my show." And I just was over the moon because this was not her anticipation. She was definitely feeling she was going to freak out and it was going to be a really horrible weekend. And she had a delightful weekend. And the word that she described it with was to say that she was content. And I love that. We love that for her, and just super proud of her. And it's really one of the things that I love with my one-on-one clients is giving them that personalized path, because everybody really is so different when it comes to their anxiety. And it was so delightful to see her conquer this big weekend, and good for you, Char. So proud of you. So let's talk about one thing that happened recently for Craig and I. And so I've basically trained Craig to be a bit of a dream interpreter. I, it's a long story, but we've been doing a lot of spiritual work. And one thing that I kind of started taking on, which is a bit of like a hobby of mine, I guess, is to interpret dreams. And I've kind of been teaching Craig along the way. And this week, I recently had an experience where I had kind of like a I would say racy. I don't know. I was smooching with a guy. Okay, a guy that we were just watching a movie, and the guy happened to be in it. Anyway, so I was telling him about this dream, and it was kind of a schmexy dream. And I was so worried about his reaction. Like, this is kind of what we do in the mornings on our morning walks together. I basically download my dream with him. And I was so worried this time in particular about what his reaction was going to be. And mind you, I've told him other dreams as well where I was smooching. So this was like nothing new. And I was so worried about what his reaction was going to be. And I got curious. So in that moment where I was overthinking, like, oh my, is he going to be upset about this? I really got curious instead of feeding into it. And I want to talk about more about that today and the things that we basically make up in our head. And so there is, again, a pattern. If you are new here, anxious attachment to me is a pattern of behaviors, right? So the loop that tends to happen, the pattern that tends to happen is we go into, it was so good, right? Which means maybe internally we might start thinking or preparing for something is going to go bad. And I'm not even just talking during the weekend, I'm talking Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? Where maybe they're getting back into their work week, right? And you guys went on a vacation, or you went out of town, or there's a getaway, there's a long weekend, there's a lot of things happening. They need to be focused on the task at hand. They need to be working. And so whether we are conscious about it, which I'll tell you 90% of the time that is not the truth. Like, we are unconsciously creating some scenario in our head, right? And did they really say that this weekend? Did he really mean it when he said he loved me? Or, what if this changes? What if that one little disagreement or that miscommunication we had is like he's going to change his mind, right? And we tend to manufacture some kind of threat because the absence of threat is actually feels way more dangerous, right? That this can't be that good. And so literally this would happen to me almost every single week. I would create some kind of scenario or some kind of hiccup or some kind of fight unintentionally because the absence of not having the fight felt so dangerous. And the one thing I see again and again with my clients is that you've done work on yourself, right? Like that is true. You're not lazy. And you also might know that they are a really safe person, right? They have shown that to you again and again. And you are still on guard, right? You're still kind of bracing. And it doesn't mean that you don't feel that anxiety when you can understand it. It really is a difference of you can understand something and also not know how to navigate it, right? So it's like passing a test for fluency in a language. Like you might be able to hear it, but can you speak it and can you write it? That's very true for me in my native language of Visayan, my mom's Filipino dialect. I can hear it, but I'm not fluent, right? I can kind of get the gist, but I'm definitely not on a full layer of navigating my mother's dialect, right? So there is a huge difference between knowing something and being able to navigate it, right? Because knowing just what it is not enough for something to change. And every good moment, when we're in this deep in this pattern, every good moment becomes this setup essentially for disappointment, right? You start shrinking and minimizing the good moments, and there are good moments. So you start to minimize them, you start to shrink them because they're at the end of the day, there is this huge fear of that drop. Okay. So you stop letting the good things be actually really good, right? So when we're in that, I just want to remind you that exactly what happened in that dream moment, right, with Craig, but I caught the scan before it became this spiral. Okay. I caught myself in that moment. And something that I see tends to become almost, I'll just even say inevitable. It becomes like the thing that has to happen is your safety system does not speak logically. Okay. And that's also what's so frustrating because a lot of you are so successful in your careers and there's ladders and there's steps that it takes. There's degrees you have to get, there's certifications, there's letters behind your name that you have to get. So that type of success in a linear fashion is kind of what you're used to, I'm going to guess, right? And that's not how emotional connection works. That's not how deep closeness and intimacy is created. So your safety systems don't speak in logic, right? It speaks in pattern. Okay. Logic and pattern are two different things. So when we're feeling that stress, it's survival and then it's safety. Okay. Where peace and the unknown is it's going to feel dangerous, right? So when you are used to stress and survival, that becomes, I'm not saying it feels safe, it's just like what is safe for you, which is very different than peace and contentment, which Shar was talking about, is about the unknown, right? It's about, you're going to feel dangerous, right? It's going to feel dangerous. So it's like being used to an alarm that goes off, right, every night, and then one night silence, right? That silence can be actually scarier than the alarm. Think about that. Sit with that. The silence can actually be scarier than that alarm. In some ways, you kind of get used to it. And I just have to say this, but your brain isn't necessarily broken. Okay. It's actually doing the exact thing that it needed to do to survive, straight up. And what I also know is what it's learned is keeping you from actually feeling the deep connection, the deep love that you actually want, right? So I often refer to this as being in a comfort zone, right? Scaring yourself into thinking a fake scenario isn't fun. It's just comfortable. It's just kind of what you know. It's survival. You've just done it again and again, right? And think about your job or your career. You are probably, I'm thinking about every single one of my clients. Like they have really complex jobs, right? Whether it's project management or being a doctor or being a lawyer, like it's really, you have basically trained your system to think in a linear fashion. I was going to say very linearly. I guess, is that a word? You guys can DM me. But that again, that's not how patterns break. So your brain isn't broken. It's doing what it learned to survive, and it's keeping you, again, that just because it's surviving doesn't mean it's actually getting you what you want. And I know one thing, I know that working so hard to earn the good moments is so bittersweet, because you might be having a wonderful time or having the weekend that you want, but you're spending it checked out. You're not able to be present with them. And I don't know if you know this, but being in a deeper relationship means being present with each other, right? Don't you want them to be present with you, but you're the one sitting there not able, thinking about what's going to happen when we get home, what's going to happen on Monday, what's going to happen, right? That actually takes away from where the connection and the love is actually built. And one thing I do know with certainty, this is why we work on this with my clients, is that when you understand your unique system that reads peace as danger or is seeking for that danger, you stop fighting the anxiety and you start getting curious with it. You're able to sit with it in a different way. You're able to experience it in a different way. All right. And that's exactly, again, like what happened with my client, right? Instead of bracing for impact and like, oh my gosh, it's going to be the worst weekend ever, we went over step by step how to stay with that and how to navigate that. And here she is, feeling super content. So, speaking of Monday spirals, I had a question from the community that is actually very related to this. And there was a little bit of a best friend weird vibe situation. And I feel like didn't get it's a pretty long little question, but I wanted to summarize it. But basically, there was a best friend. The vibes felt a little off, right? There was some love interest between this person and the other. And I, what I want to say around this, like maybe you're in a situation where the vibes feel off, or something was communicated, and it's maybe things have shifted. And the thing that I feel is so important to say, because it's so common but not necessarily normal, and I want to speak to what's underneath. And what is underneath that is driving all of this is you. You are the common denominator. And if we are constantly in this state of, okay, I want to talk to them and I got to make sure I said it right, and there's a misunderstanding, and are we good? I want us to be good, right? And I'm thinking very specifically of this best friend situation, but I'm hoping you're hearing that this is often the thing that I hear with most clients. Like, are we good? Like, I just want to double check. And because you've done that, now things are not good, right? Because you're not able to sit with that. And I know it's so tempting. The more we think that if we can clarify something, if I explain something better, right? Or if I can just make sure they fully understand it, let me explain it again, or let's talk about it again. And what I really want to say is, the part of you that's the common denominator in this is the perfection, right? And the thing with did I say it right? Are we good? Is perfection, I'll tell you, it is one of the most destructive things in a relationship. It's totally destructive. And it really destroys any ability for a relationship to grow deeper, because relationships aren't perfect. I don't know if you know that, but Instagram is not real. Relationships are, even the best ones are not perfect. That's a huge difference. Even the best ones are not perfect. And I think we can get really distracted with social media or whatever we're kind of taught or conditioned to think around relationship. And I'm not trying to also romanticize hardship. Like, that's also not the deal here, where relationships have to be hard or we have to suffer in relationships. That's not what I'm saying. But one thing that I know is what the feeling that I got from this question was like we're trying to get it right, and often in the scramble to get it right, we mess up the puzzle, right? We scatter the pieces. So, the last thing I'll say about that is a lot of people spend years waiting for things to change and for the fake scenario making to go away instead of learning how to navigate them better. And so if that's you, don't stay stuck, and you can always DM me and we can talk more about what that looks like. Okay, angels, I'm sending you lots of love. Mwah.